afternoon. This is Shay. Welcome to the Shay Show. Today we're getting to speak with Don Rushing. Don calls himself a possibilitarian. He's someone who thinks that there's equality and enough for everyone at the table. He wants to have conversations that we're avoiding, and he wants to push the needle towards change. Hey, Don.
Hey, good to be on.
Good to have you. Hey, Don, earlier today, you and I were speaking, and I was like, don't tell me too much, because if I know too much, I won't ask the questions that I want, that I ask when I'm sitting in that place of great curiosity. So earlier you said, Shay, I want to have the conversation that people are avoiding, but we desperately need to have. What is that conversation? What are some of those conversations?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I would preface that with the conversation, and this is both individually and as a society, and honestly as a species.
I get it.
The conversations we're most avoiding are the conversations we most need to be having.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the most important conversations. In fact, that should be for yourself, that should be when the light bulb comes on, is when you're really trying to avoid a conversation.
Sure.
That's your clue that's the conversation you most need to have.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them. A lot of them.
It's easier to say, like, what is a conversation that you think needs to be had right now that people are avoiding? Because you're right, there are multiple conversations. There's a myriad of conversations.
Yeah, and I think some of them we've been avoiding for a long time. For example, our conversation around equality.
Sure.
Is a conversation we've really been avoiding for a long time, and we've really kind of kicked the can down the road.
Yes.
For a while. And I would point out that, in our own personal relationships, if you think about the times when you keep things bottled up inside of you, when you should say something to someone, a friend, a family member, a significant other,
Sure.
That never ends well. You bottle it up until it just kind of explodes.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing that take place on a national level right
Sure.
now. With this conversation about true equality,
sure,
is something we've put off. We know we should have talked about it, but we've just put it off, and now it's festered, and it's just kind of surfaced, So I'm curious to see if we're gonna have that conversation now, if we're gonna try and kick it down the road a little bit more. So that's one of the conversations. I think conversations about the public education system is a conversation we're really avoiding.
Sure.
I think conversations around how we govern ourselves.
Sure.
Actually is a conversation that we've been avoiding. Conversations around, in alignment with, how we govern ourselves. So conversations around, avoiding the conversation of, do we really want to continue down the road of a few individuals making choices for the rest of the population? So those are the kind of conversations around relationships. Actually, I think that goes into equality a little bit, but
so let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Now we know some of the conversations that you're like, hey, these are conversational topics. Let's dive in. What are things that you want to have, conversations you want to have about equality? I think what are beating in your heart about that?
Yeah, I think my biggest point with equality is that we're really robbing ourselves of our full potential collectively.
Sure.
By not creating civilizations where we have true equality. And here's why we're really shorting ourselves or robbing ourselves. If you look around the world right now, now look, I know I know there's a lot of bad things going on, but you have to admit we've really built an incredible world.
Oh yeah.
The quality of life collectively right now, I mean, so many of us enjoy privileges that were used to be reserved for the elites, or you had to be a king or some kind of royal family. That's not to say everyone's getting a seat at that table, but we really have built an amazing world. But my thought about that is everything you see that we've built right now, if you think that's impressive, keep in mind that we've built that with not everybody playing, not everyone on the team participating.
Sure.
I think as I've thought about this, I used to think maybe, only half of the team was playing. I actually think it's probably been a little bit less. I think we can, until recently, we've left out half the population when we think about how the dominant culture has kind of left women out of participating on a large scale. Fortunately, in the last few decades, we've seen more and more numbers of women coming in, but there's still a dominant culture that doesn't feel it's advantageous to let that percentage of the population in, and roughly 50% of the population on the planet are women. So right off the bat, we've excluded for centuries that portion of the population, and then for some reason in the year 2020 we still find ourselves struggling with something as superficial as skin color. And so that portion of the population hasn't been able to fully contribute because of the dominant culture as well. So I think it's, when I look around the world that we've built and how incredible it is and the things we've achieved in recent times, that was only done with less than 50% of the team playing. So now I wonder, what does a world look like where we begin to let everyone have a seat at the table? What are we missing out on?
And why do you care about this?
That's a great question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that before. I think it's probably a combination of things, and it's probably an evolutionary answer, meaning just as I've evolved in my own life, I've gone through the process, and Darwin was one of the first people to speak about this, where as humanity as a whole goes through an evolution, we start to gain, and as we gain intelligence, we gain our level of empathy and connection starts to get larger and larger. So we can move in originally where maybe I only had empathy or particularly cared specifically about my family, then it could move out to maybe my peer group, my religious group, then my community as a whole. And for me, as I've evolved as a person and gained and increased my intelligence, that's just something that's naturally happened, where I've started to realize, a lot of the negative effects that we see around the world we're talking about real human beings.
Right. It sounds like what it sounds like you're doing, and pardon me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're also understanding that every human being on this planet is here for something.
I definitely believe that.
Life, and they're here to bring something to the world. So if all members of this society, i.e. the world on the macro level, are not allowed to bring all of their gifts to the table, we all are robbed, are we not?
That is a correct statement. Yeah. I mean, so for members of the dominant culture who think that, they're going to miss out on something if we do let everyone have a seat at the table, that's actually the exact opposite. If they think their life is a prosperous now, Wait until everybody gets to contribute, and that would usher in what I like to refer to as an era of unparalleled prosperity.
I love it. And I would
So,
say, if I could piggyback on what you're saying, I would say, this is my opinion, that it's not even so much that they haven't been bringing their gifts, because whether the dominant society accepts them, acknowledges it, sees the value and the beauty, I really think it comes down to seeing the value, because it's there, right? The gifts are there. You just may not have been like utilizing them or realizing that, man, look at what this does for me. So for me, what I'm hearing you say is, hey, get a broader perspective, get a broader vision. Like you're looking here, just down the tunnel. And if I have a 180-degree peripheral vision, I'm missing out all the way over here and all the way over here if I'm only looking right here.
Yeah. Anytime we can zoom out, we gain a better perspective, right? I mean, I think about prior to, I don't know, I think about maybe a couple centuries ago or even a century ago, when there was a natural disaster, people tended to think that, there was like an almighty being somewhere that was smiting them. Yeah. And now we have satellites circling our planet, and
we're like, it's a hurricane.
It's like a hurricane. It's a natural occurring thing, and nobody did anything wrong. It's just how our planet works. Yeah. Or there's an earthquake, but we live on a planet that has tectonic plates, and we know that now. But we've gained that perspective by zooming out.
Do you have a particular story in your life where you have seen, oh my God, this value was here? My perspective was closed to said value. Now my eyes are open, and this is the benefit in my life. Do you have anything? Because right now we're talking theoretical, and it's awesome in the abstract, but I want to bring it to the specifics, the specific of possibly you, Don, or myself, because that's where people are really going to hear us, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you putting me on the spot with that. And of course, the answer is yes. I mean, as one of the greatest teachers that ever walked the planet pointed out one time, that the wound is the place where the light enters.
Woo.
And that was Rumi.
Yes, I love Rumi.
Yeah, 13th century.
13th century.
Afghan refugee.
Mm-hmm.
Fleeing the Mongol invasion. So yeah, I mean, he was accurate, and sure, yeah. And I think that I have a lot of stories. I think all of us do. The first significant one for me was, so I grew up in rural Wyoming, in a small town of 300 people.
Aww.
In the 70s and the 80s.
Hey.
And
did you have feathered things? Did you have feathered hair?
That was my brother and my sister, actually.
I always liked the white boys who had the middle part and the feathering on the outside. I was like, do it. Hey.
Now that you say that, I think during middle school for a time I did, but.
You had the look, Don. So now we know that Don was rocking the hot look.
Yeah. But we were truly isolated from the rest of the planet, So, and to kind of put it in perspective, the first time I saw another human being with dark skin was in 6th grade. Like, that was the first time for me, other than a television show, right?
Okay. So, in the abstract, they exist because I see them on TV.
Correct.
Interface with another human being who has brown skin or darker skin, as you said it. 6th grade.
Yeah, okay. It was actually my 6th grade teacher.
What was her name?
Yes, Mr. Stevens, and here we are.
First of all, let's just give a shout out to Mr. Stevens for being what I'm pretty sure was the only Black person up in Wyoming in the 1970s or 80s.
Probably one of the few. Go, Mr. Stevens. And he really did have a marked effect on my life. But nonetheless, first time.
Real quick, if you don't mind, what is so powerful to me is the effect, to your larger point that you came out the gate on, the effect that we can have on each other. I'm sure Mr. Stevens, for whatever reason, whatever got him to Wyoming in, what you said, the 80s, 70s, 80s,
Yeah,
whatever,
this would have been late 80s.
late 80s, whatever got Mr. Stevens to Wyoming in the 80s, I don't know what it was. Whatever kept him there, I don't know what it was. But what I do know is, and I can almost guarantee is Mr. Stevens had no clue that 30, 40 years later, his student, Don Rushing, would be talking about him and the marked effect he had on him. So it just shows me the power that we can have on each other. And when you understand you can have that type of power to impact someone, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do it?
Right.
With intentionality behind it.
Which brings to mind another conversation, the conversation of perceived power and authority is nothing more than an illusion.
Right.
You don't have it. We only have influence, but that's a conversation we avoid for sure. But yeah, so my first time seeing another human with dark skin, I mean, I'm 12ish years old.
Yeah.
And then at age 15, I had the privilege of moving.
What do you remember thinking when you saw him? Take us back to that. Was it strange for you?
It was just curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Just curious. I think at that time I'm 12, so my curiosity gene hadn't completely been squashed out by the education system.
Yeah.
So yeah, just probably more curiosity. It's something I had never seen with my own eyes before. And that's what I remember. Just I've always wanted to just I've always been curious. I think humans just kind of show up curious, but yeah, so it's just more curiosity. And then at age 15, I had the privilege of moving to Hawaii. Ooh. Where I was the minority.
To go to Hawaii from Wyoming? Hello, we're talking about
it was pure
social change.
Yeah, I was pure chance, but nonetheless, here I find myself living on the island of Maui as a human with white skin,
right?
And now I'm the minority. I'm sure I probably had heard that word before, but well, in fact, I know I had. In the area I lived in, there was a significant Latino population. So, and I understood the concept of them being the minority or labeled as a minority. And so now I got to experience that. I think that was probably the first eye-opening experience where I remember trying to wrap my brain around that people disliked me or wanted to physically harm me because of the color of my skin.
More importantly, what I think you really felt is because of a narrative that they ascribed to you that had nothing to do with you individually.
Correct. Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, that's so bizarre when you first interface with that, when you realize that you're interfacing with a story that has nothing to do with you, and you're having to kind of beat down the walls of said story just to show up and be seen.
I remember being confused by that. Yeah, I remember thinking about that. But what a great experience.
Right. But part of that made you go, okay, these are very different things. Mr. Stevens is brown. I am now in this situation that I don't look like anybody else around me. What part of you took that information and extrapolated something that said, and we all have something to give, and we all benefit from the giving?
You know, I don't think I fully, I look at that as more just planted a seed that would spring up later.
I love it.
Yeah, my mind at the time, I don't, if I did have those thoughts, I certainly probably wouldn't have been able to articulate them.
Yeah, sure. Nor would I have.
But I do remember the experience. And as we mentioned, being confused at being identified as a story rather than an individual human. And so I've had different experiences in my life. Probably the most profound, where it just kind of solidified it for me, was in 2015. And so, and here's where I'm going to go ahead and practice one of my beliefs of, and it's not my idea that I came up with. It's an idea I first heard from Ray Dalio. And he's a very intelligent person. I encourage anyone to look him up, but he talks a lot about radical transparency. And so,
Yeah.
and then also I'm going to combine it with the idea of that vulnerability is a superpower. Something Brene Brown talks a lot about. My mentor, one of my mentors, Lisa Nichols, probably all my mentors have at one time. But so that having been said, so 2015, I found myself in a situation where, so at the time I hate using labels, and I'm trying to think about how to,
that's all right,
to tell this without labeling myself something. But at the moment I can't. So I was a single parent at the time. I'm raising two daughters. Let's see, at the time, those children now are 16 and 22. So you do the math at how old they were at the time. And I was falsely accused of child abuse. And so I had the experience of I gained a lot of valuable information, which is the idea of you're innocent until proven guilty is actually a lie that doesn't exist. I think that's a warm fuzzy we tell ourselves to block it out and kick the can of that conversation down the road. Right. So and I was very fortunate to have the money to be able to purchase representation in the court system. And I'd never considered that concept before either. I had never thought about the fact that how can we call something the justice system if you have to have money to use it? That's those two don't go together. We've given it that label again to give it the warm fuzzies. It's not the justice system. There can be no justice if it takes money to use it. I was fortunate enough to have the money because if I hadn't, I would have ended up in jail and would have carried that mark with me. Because I had the money, I was able to hire the top attorney that was well respected, well known, and I got it taken care of. I got my name cleared $40,000 later. But like, what if I hadn't have had that 40,000? And what about the people who don't? And so I remember one day I'm sitting in the courtroom, and you get to sit there and you get to watch everybody else go up before your case gets called up. And I'm looking around this courtroom and I'm seeing other human beings that didn't have the means that I had at the time. And they were just screwed. They were screwed. Whatever's coming to them that day, they just had to take it. They didn't have any other option. And I was watching humans being treated as something much less than a human. And then of course I started researching our criminal justice system and found out some of the horribly disgusting facts about it. And honestly, there's really no other way to put it. But and that, I don't know, that really struck a chord to me that, this isn't working for me. This idea that
that's awesome.
that people are being exploited for really what it boils down to is a transference of wealth is what the criminal justice system boils down to. That bothered me. And I realized, I just remember how profound it was that it had nothing to do with whether I was guilty or not. It just had to do with did I have the money to access the system and hire the most well-connected, and best at their game attorney? And now that was it.
That's huge.
That bothered me. So, it took me several years to get out to really gain my true freedom from that. I mean, I did have to carry that label for a while, and there were consequences of, even though I won and cleared my name of that, I still had to carry other labels with me for a while that took years to get out from under.
Hey, Don.
Yes.
Daryl is indicating to me that we have to go to
Okay, great.
Okay, we'll be back. So we're back here to the Shay Show with Don Rushing. So Don was really diving into a story that was speaking to the question of, why would you care? Why would you care about whether or not everybody has something to give this world, and we benefit and we therefore lose greatly when they're not able to give their gifts? Don, take us back. You were finishing the story of 2015.
Correct.
And your interface, where your real, personal back and forth with the criminal justice system, really.
Yeah. Well, so really that is a whole story in and of itself. But what I would point out about the experience is I found myself where I believed I was powerless. And I found myself in a situation where I actually could no longer do anything about the situation. And by some miracle, I was taking some mentoring from a man by the name of Jim Rohn. And he said something very profound that it changed the direction for me. And he said, when you can no longer change the situation, the only thing you can do is change yourself.
Yes, that's a powerful one.
It was powerful. And of course, I'd heard that before. I think every great teacher that's walked the planet has said that in their own way.
Sure.
Whether it was, Gandhi saying, be the change you want to see, or every great teacher's talked about this, but it never clicked until this moment where all I could do was improve myself. And Jim Rohn also pointed out that, when you grow, everything grows for you.
Ooh, glory. That is a powerful one. Honestly, if people really get that, why would you not want to implement every growth strategy that you can lay your hands on? If you grow, everything around you grows.
And I had never thought of that before. The world teaches, there's a narrative in the world right now. It's one that does not serve us very well, but the narrative is that your success in life is 85, 90% of what's going on out here.
Right.
And maybe a little bit of what's going on inside. And they actually have that backwards. And of course, when I look around and see how many things aren't working, it's no surprise to me, because they're not operating on their full potential. It's 85 to 90% what's going on in here.
Sure.
And 5 to 10 or 10 to 15% out here.
Absolutely.
Jim Rohn was able to switch that for me. So, because he said, if you want things to get better, you have to get better. If you want things to change, you have to change. Well, when I look at around the world, we want to just keep, and I wasn't exempt from this. We want to stay the same, and we want to have something different show up.
That is awesome. It's so
right? But that's not, if something different was going to show up, it would have shown up already, right?
Right.
That's not.
We're not willing to change. Could it possibly be that the different thing could show up, but you don't even recognize it? to be the thing, to be the juggernaut that can transform your life. So then it goes back to your initial point that you just made regarding the internal. 85% of that, 85, 90% of it is all of what's in here. Because if that isn't changed, that means that beauty, glory, brilliance could show up in front of you. It could be the different thing, and you still would see it as the same.
And one of the most profound statements that I've ever heard, and I can't remember the name of I don't even know if it's attributed to the person I heard it from. Maybe they were just repeating it, but it was truth, which is, you can change your hair, you can change your clothes, you can change your home, you can change your spouse. But if you don't change yourself, the same experiences will continue to perpetuate themselves over and over again because everything outwardly changed and nothing inwardly changed.
That's right.
So
now your perception of the things are probably the very same thing. I mean, that's why perception is so key and it's such a powerful thing. If what you see it as is not going to change, and the things that you see, they really will not change. They will be the same, even if they're amazing and even if they are transformative. Like just on a simple level, I work in new home sales, and this is it's a cushy job, and it's a job that could transform someone's life financially, absolutely. And yet there are people who filter in and out of this career and struggle. Like you see them come in and then they go out, and you're like, this is a job where this dude over here last year made $500,000 a year. So it truly is an opportunity. This man has made $500,000 a year, and then this person comes in and is unable to scrap together 30. The situation is the same. How did they both approach this very opportunity so differently? You know what I mean?
And teaching entrepreneurship, I started my first business at age 19, my second at age 23, but teaching entrepreneurship is something I focus on a lot through mentoring. But you've pointed out another conversation that we don't have, which is the conversation of why is the narrative to chase the money instead of chase your happiness? Like,
oh my God, for real.
And I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk talk a lot about this. Of
Gary V.
Yeah, Gary V. And if I can make $500,000 over here or millions, and it's soul destroying, versus over here maybe I'm only making 80,000 or 100,000, but I wake up every morning happy.
Right.
Why is this the one we're teaching? Because that's a really that's not a good idea, and it's causing a lot of issues in our society. But nonetheless,
I want to tell a story to that point, that very exact Gary V point that you just brought up. So I had a friend, he's still my friend. He and his wife, they worked at Goldman Sachs in the city and in New York City, and made just like stupid money year after year and after year. And one thing that I learned from Ryan is if he sat down and told you about his life, during that time, one day he was telling a story, and I was just like so mesmerized because it was like such a fancy pantsy life. I was like, man, that is fancy pantsy. I'm leaning into the fanciness of it. And, he's going to Nobu every night, he's going to this restaurant, this bar, taking people out all the time, limo service from here to there, car service everywhere, sometimes having a helicopter from this place to that. And I mean, it's just sounding like hello, Sex in the City with guys, like it just sounded so great. And he's such a transparent human being. And I said, man, Ryan, that sounds so kind of amazing. He looked at me, and I'd say Ryan is probably anywhere from 5 to 10 years older than me. I don't know which one. And he said, Shay, yeah, it was good money, but that was some of the most expensive money I ever made in my life. And I loved how he said that. Expensive money. It cost him something. So it didn't really matter how beautiful and shiny and like large the money was. What he was saying was the cost to his soul, to his internal world was great. And when he sat down and did the math, it didn't add up and he had to leave.
Right. And, this is a great time to point out something that I point out as often as I can, that there is a very big difference between an entrepreneur and a business person. And
Sure.
I think we need to get that idea out there. I think the two often, I think business people often want to call themselves entrepreneurs, because when you understand what the difference is, you see that the entrepreneur is the higher level of evolution. And the difference is business people, they do everything they do for the dollars. And that is the focus. But entrepreneurs, they do everything they do to move humanity forward.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
And that's an idea I first heard from Vishen Lakhiani. He is the co-founder of Mind Valley University, but so accurate. And, the thing with entrepreneurs that they understand is if you create value, the natural consequence is the money naturally shows up. So quit chasing the money and figure out a way to solve problems and create real value in the world.
Absolutely. And to your point, and bring your gifts. Correct. Bring your gifts to us, to the table, because we benefit from it.
As one of my mentors pointed out, Jack Canfield, and it's an idea I like to share, the idea of, look, if everybody just did what they were meant to do, then the world would just work.
It would just, wouldn't it go?
It really would. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. I understand that look, a lot of these ideas, they're really simple ideas, but as one of the greatest minds of our modern times pointed out, Albert Einstein, simplicity is the sign of genius. And when I look around and I see, governments or businesses creating
more and more
complexity,
yes,
that's how I know that something's like, the only reason you want to create complexity is because you want to confuse me.
Yes, you want to keep people from sitting at the table.
Yeah. So So they're really simple ideas. Now I understand they're difficult to grasp and difficult. Like, it's really difficult to make a decision today that's going to benefit humanity versus my wallet. I understand that. But what we're really talking about here is character building. And if I grow myself, everything else will grow for me. I think of something the Russian author Leo Tolstoy said, which is, everybody thinks to change the world, but no one thinks to change themselves. It really starts.
Because the first one sounds so grand and important. Let me change the world. The other one sounds tedious. Let me change myself, and laborious. You know what I mean?
And it is. I'll be honest. It's the most difficult labor you'll ever engage in to change yourself and to change the way you think.
Yeah.
But that experience in 2015, when Jim Rohn pointed that out to me, that if I want things to get better, I have to get better. And, I have to change myself. So I just began feverishly this unquenchable
internal work.
Yeah. And I've never stopped.
So when I asked you, hey, what would you do? I see that we are about to go to break, but I do want to leave on this question. I asked you, what would you do to encourage other people to have these types of conversations and probative insight into themselves and to the larger society? I want you to tell me, what would you say? Where should people start? So we need to take it and not make it so esoteric, and make it very pragmatic, so something that they can implement in their lives. And we'll talk about it the moment we come back from break.
Sounds good.
Hey there, guys. This is Shay. We're back with Don Rushing. And Don is just talking to us about everything introspection, everything about making changes internally and seeing those changes in the larger world that we live in. So Don, right before break, I asked you the question, okay, tell me a practical thing that people can start doing right now to start initiating these questions, these conversations in their lives, these types of probative research into themselves. Where do we start? Where do we start? Take it out of the heavens, bring it into the earth, and bring it to our hearts.
Well, quite honestly, it's really not something, this is not something you're going to be able to accomplish all by yourself. You have to, as another one of my mentors, Les Brown, points out, like you have to find people that can see things about you that you can't see yourself, because we're stuck inside ourselves.
That's right. It's our blind spot.
Yeah. So we need to find mentors and coaches and friends. We need to surround ourselves with those high quality people that can see those things about us. And, you know, with a mentor, you always want to have mentors or coaches that are 5 to 10 steps ahead of you.
Yes.
And they're going to be able to see those things about you that you can't see about yourself. And then, that having been said, you want to create that space with those relationships, particularly with friends and family. And I'm always telling my team members or my family or my friends that, look, my goal is to create a space where you feel safe enough to tell me these things about myself, because if you guys don't tell me, I'm never gonna figure it out. I need that from you guys.
So what I'm hearing you say is, like, when I'm asking this pointed question, like, Don, tell us where to start. The one thing I'm hearing you say is, hey, look around you. Look at, kind of to that old adage that says, look at the 5 people that are closest to you in your life. And that's where you will be a year to 5 years from now, right?
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing you say is, do an assessment of what's around you, get yourself around people who are steps ahead of you and who are having those conversations, and join said conversations.
Look, this is one of the reasons why we're on a planet with nearly, I mean, we're pushing 8 billion people now.
Lord Jesus.
If we were really meant to just not be around other people, like the benefit,
we need each other.
Yeah. Right. So, and yeah, it's correct. The 5 people you spend the most time with, like, you're the product of that. And so it's okay to, now look, I have people, one thing I love about my life is I have people from both ends of the spectrum, and I enjoy that. But I'm very conscious about the 5 people
that are in my inner circle.
Correct. That I spend the most time with. And it's okay to rotate those in and out as you grow, right? You always want to find those people that are wherever you want to be, find people that are there and surround yourself with them. And so one thing I noticed,
you need to be a part of.
It's going to naturally, those conversations are naturally going to happen by being around those types of people. And one thing I noticed, success leaves clues. And, one thing I noticed is about all my coaches and mentors is I finally realized one day, and I think it was Lisa Nichols that was the first one I heard this from, but like they all had 3 to 5 coaches themselves. And I remember getting exposed to that, and oh yeah, well, if one's doing me good, how much progress could I make with 5, right? So that is something I dive into. I am constantly having, conversations with those mentors, 3 to 5 of them at a time. And through these devices here, I have access to humans that lived before me, so quite honestly, I've had people as a mentor, like I've had Maya Angelou as a mentor. I've had Nelson Mandela. I've had Henry Ford. I've had George Washington. On and on, right?
Yeah.
And so you're not limited to people any longer that are just living on the planet. So find those people and put them into your top 5. So
I
they
love that.
through this device, I can have, even though they may not live in my town, I've had Jack Canfield in my top 5. I've had Lisa Nichols in my top 5. I've had Margaret Mead in my top 5. I've had Oprah in my top 5, right?
Yeah.
So don't feel like you're limited to just, who's
People
in.
who are alive and who you can eat dinner with.
Correct.
It's people who you can spend time with their thoughts, how they approach life, how they approach the world around them, how they approach
Correct.
each other, right? Other human beings.
And they're going to have different perspectives that are different than the common narratives out there, because what we're really talking about when we start talking about equality and that ushering in an era of unparalleled prosperity, what we're really talking about is restructuring the way our civilizations are built. And if that sounds like a crazy idea to you, I'll point out 2 things. Number one, everything's always a crazy idea the day before it happens.
Ain't that the truth, brother?
You want to know what's crazy is walking into a room and flipping a light switch and a light comes on. Like, that's crazy.
That's right.
So, and secondly,
what is that old, and I might be saying it wrong, but I remember reading a quote of Henry Ford, is if he had listened to the people, this is the gist. Now, I'm not going to say it perfectly, but if he had listened to people, they would have just wanted a faster horse.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
They weren't like, you know what we need? We need this thing that has wheels and combustion and then it moves. And, they just would want, like, how can we get our horse to run faster?
Right. And so, yeah, my second point is, going back in history, is like, if it sounds like a crazy idea when having the discussion of changing how we build our civilizations, there was a group of people that got together about 250 years ago with the similar idea.
Exactly.
And they rethought and reinvented how to build a civilization. And that was the birth of the United States, right? What I want to point out is they knew they weren't doing the end game.
Right.
What I want to point out is they knew they were setting something in motion that we are intended to finish.
Absolutely.
We really are. And what they set in motion was the promise of true equality. They knew they couldn't achieve that back then. They knew they were just setting it in motion, but we can achieve that today. And I'll point out something further. I'll make a prediction that we will achieve that by the turn of the next century. I'm confident humans, and I get that it looks a little iffy right now.
What does that personify? When you say we will achieve that, break it down.
We will achieve, by the turn of the next century, humans will completely evolve past all of our cultural differences, our ethnic differences, our religious differences. I believe you'll even see armies disbanded. And we will usher in that era of true equality, which, when I think about the prosperity that will bring, I really can't even wrap my brain around it when we're all fully contributing, when everyone's at the table, when no one is excluded. And so we're going to change the way we govern ourselves. We're going to change the way we educate ourselves. We're going to change the way we inform ourselves. But that's our destiny, quite honestly, is true equality. I really don't think it's something you can stop.
Yeah.
And I get when we look around, it looks a little iffy right now, but I would point out a pattern throughout history that the pattern has always been a short period of entropy right before humans make a breakthrough.
Ooh.
And I'm suggesting,
break down for those people who do not know the word entropy. What does entropy mean?
It's a time period of where things seem to devolve, like go in the opposite direction. But if you
Kind of like a,
Yeah, if you zoom out,
mhm.
you'll see little dips throughout history where humans faced something and it looked like,
It's
oh, this is bad. This is
Yeah.
bad. But then they're always followed by long periods of achievement, right?
So you just said something that makes me want to ask you this question. Tell me, because I know we are about to close out, but I want to know, what is your highest hope in terms of takeaway from this conversation that you and I had today? What's your highest hope for a takeaway?
Well, to be honest, I'm not one that puts a lot of value in hope. I
Okay.
recognize hope can be powerful, but it's quite a different thing to know something than it
Okay.
is to hope or wish for something.
Okay.
And what I know is it looks rough, but
Mhm.
humans, we're about to pull off an upset and next
Sure.
level that shiz.
Yes.
And so I would say the difficulties you see right now are actually an indication of that.
Ooh,
So
that gave
what
me chills.
well, I hope that resonates because
Yes.
I'm confident. Look, there's always better days ahead than those we've left behind, and just learn to recognize the patterns of throughout humanity, and you would realize that we are about to take it to the next level. I'm confident that this 100-year period, the year 2000 to the year 2100,
Mhm.
will be looked back upon thousands of years from now as a marked century
Mm.
in humanity where we made that shift, and we get to be part of that.
Isn't that kind of,
So what I know takes place from these conversations
yeah.
is it helps us start to think about things, and having conversations is a conversation that we're avoiding right now. Like, people don't want to have conversations right now about different ideas, and I'm not sure what the issue there is. I think
Okay.
it's really just a fear-based thing,
Yeah,
and
it is.
but if we can create a space where we
Mhm.
say, hey, number one, just because you're not some expert or some politician or something,
Mhm.
you get to initiate conversation. Please join us in that. And number two, just because you don't have the ability to go down by the creek and walk on water, so just because you're not perfect does not exclude you from initiating conversation. I'm
I
not
love.
sure where we thought when we started thinking that unless you're perfect, you don't have the right to initiate conversation. That's not true, because first of all, if you're perfect, I can't even relate to you.
Right.
It's my imperfections and your imperfections that make us perfect to relate to other people, right? So
It's,
let's let go of that idea of having to be perfect.
yes.
Like as Maya Angelou always pointed out, when you know better, you do better.
Better. That's good.
So we're fine, okay? Like, I don't need you to be perfect to initiate conversation. I want to hear the value of what you have to say, even if I don't initially agree with it, or if I'll never agree with it. You're going to get me to think about things differently, and that's the value. And I know that's what these types of conversations bring about. So what
That's
I'm all about, just encouraging people, like, initiate those conversations, because right now the negative narrative, like, they've got that scaled to
yeah,
all of
yeah,
humanity. So
yeah.
we need to shift that to something that's going to serve us much better, and starting conversations and creating a space where people don't have to be right all the time, and
Yes.
where they can actually have a past but still have a voice.
Yes.
That is a higher order of evolution,
Yeah.
and that's where the change is going to happen.
I love it. So on our way out, I always end my interviews with a couple of questions from, I used to love watching James Lipton on Inside the Actors Studio.
Hmm.
And he positioned his questions based off of a French interviewer. But what sound or noise do you love, Don?
It's threefold, and they're musical instruments: the acoustic guitar, the violin, and the piano. They're all string instruments.
I love that. What sound or noise don't you love?
Oh man, jeez, that's a good one because I really don't spend hardly any time thinking about things I don't like.
That's right.
Um,
It just happens. You don't think about it. It happens and you're like, ugh, I hate that noise.
oh, I hate that noise. Oh, something in your garbage disposal that shouldn't be down there.
It's
Like
true.
a spoon or a fork,
Yes.
and you turn your garbage disposal on.
It's a horrible
That
sound.
just sounds
Okay.
bad. Yeah.
What is your favorite word?
Uh, it's probably two words, and it's the two most powerful words in any language.
Let's hear it.
I am.
I am. I love it. What is a less elevated question? What's your favorite curse word?
Oh, geez. You know, our behind the scenes person, Daryl, might be able to answer that one. But to be quite honest,
Give it.
sometimes I do tend to curse a lot. I think you'll probably even be able to find some recordings of these very conversations where I may have some swear words. But oh geez, are you really gonna make
I did. I did. I asked
it's
everybody.
probably the F bomb.
That's a good one. It's a good one. Daryl's my friend too, and I don't have perfect language at all,
Yeah.
but he still loves me. Okay, here's the most profound question. If heaven exists, what do you want God to say when you get there?
You know, that's a question I hear a lot. And I've heard it in the context of what would you ask? But I've never heard it in the context of I kind of picture if that type of thing does exist,
Mm-hmm.
and of course that's its whole other topic. But if that type of thing does exist, I kind of picture them just saying when I first get there, what did you think of that experience?
Ooh, I love I love asking that question. I hear
Yeah.
so many different answers. Don, that was a beautiful answer. This has been a beautiful time. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing time and space with us. And our takeaways, have those conversations. Find people who are doing things deeper, harder, and more elevated than you are, and join the table.
Yeah. Thank you,
I
Shay.
love it. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.